What is going on? Welcome to the It's a Blast podcast. My name's Mike, also known as the EOD Happy Captain on Twitter. Today, I'm talking to Nicole Jeffrey, a behavioral health specialist out of Fort Bliss, Texas. If you like the content that I'm producing, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow, and leave me a comment down below. Let's get started. What is going on? I'm sitting down with Nicole Jeffrey, a behavioral health specialist out of Fort Bliss, Texas. Nicole, what is going on? How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, been wanting to get you on here for a little while and just, want to talk about behavioral health and what it is that a behavioral health specialist actually does. So, can you share with us what a behavioral health specialist does?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we first enter into our MOS, we're usually just the ones who get your background information. So, have you ever been to behavioral health before? Have you ever seen a psychiatrist before? Have you ever been admitted before? And this includes before the military as well. And then, what's your family history? Were you raised by mom and dad? Were you raised by somebody else? Do you have brothers, sisters? Who are you close to? Do you not talk to your family at all? We go through your alcohol usage. Have you ever done drugs, including prescription drugs? We go through your education history. We really just do a complete history on your entire life, just so we can see the background information and what possibly brought you in to behavior health. Once we get promoted to NCO or sergeant, usually that's when our duties start veering off from patient care centered to more introducing the admin stuff. So we start going over, inpatient admissions, making sure that you have escorts. We start doing the high risk meetings and taking, some of us will even take care of the high risk list. So adding patient information on there or updating patient information, taking off patients whenever they have they've met the expectations to be removed off of the high risk list. So that is basically what we do. We can have our own patient load, but the provider and the tech have to have a really good working relationship, and trust is definitely needed because we would then be working under their license. So I haven't had my own patient load yet just because I haven't had the time. And then we can also do group therapy. So we do like drug and alcohol counseling. That can be individual or group therapy. We do anger management classes, sleep hygiene classes, stress management. Um, there's so many groups and things that you can actually do in behavior health. We would be here for a while if I listened to Paul.
No, that's awesome. And you had mentioned the high risk. What is a high risk list? For those that don't understand what that is.
So for the high risk list, those are going to be the patients who have um, either A, told us that they are contemplating suicide, and it's just our I'm trying to think of the right terminology. So if we know that they are contemplating it, but we do not think that they are going to follow through with their plans, but we know that they are high risk, we'll put them on the list. If they have attempted suicide, then they will definitely go on the list. And if they have been admitted to the inpatient ward, whether on post installation or off post, we will put them on the high risk list and track them for so long until, okay, they've met the expectations or they have met the time period to be on the high risk list.
And so you kind of talked a little bit about like, okay, what gets them on the list, but then what is that list used for? How do we follow up with those people, or our commands tracking that list? What is the purpose of it?
Yes, so commands will obviously they'll be notified. So each unit or each brigade has a behavioral health officer, and then per behavior health officer, they should have two behavior health technicians. So the BHO will go over the list with the commanders, obviously because the commanders know that that soldier has been admitted to an inpatient ward because they are notified that, hey, we are admitting your soldier to, X, Y, and Z hospital. And then it's for us to say, okay, he or she was seen on this date and they need to be seen by this date. So, we need a tech or a provider to call that patient and get them back into the clinic. Or we need to make some type of telephone contact if they've canceled their appointment. Which usually if a patient that's high risk cancels their appointment, we are calling them to say like, hey, are you okay? How's everything going? When can you come in again? Or, can you walk in on this date so that we can put eyes on you? So it's more for the clinic and for the commanders, just so we know, okay, here's all of our patients that are high risk. Here is how they're currently doing. Here's what happened. And then, what is their progress?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So let's back up just a little bit, right? So, we hear a lot in the Army and the military as a whole that if you go to behavioral health, one, the wait times are exorbitant, but two, what does that do to the career? So let's ask this question first is let's take it from, the starting point, right? So I am a soldier and I come into behavioral health, not suicidal, not homicidal, but just having some stress issues, right? So I come into behavioral health. What does that intake look like right away off the bat?
Talking about intake time or the actual intake?
So let's talk about intake time, right? I mean, we keep hearing about how long it takes to get seen. So if I just walk into the behavioral health clinic and say, hey, I need to make an appointment, I'm not high risk, what does that look like?
So I will say, um, one, ever since COVID, behavioral health treatment has increased in need. So that is why a lot of our clinics are backed up. For the most part, I will say that clinics are anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks at a wait time. Now, per policy, you should be able to get an intake within, I believe it is 7 days of asking for one. Unfortunately, right now, I don't think a lot of clinics are able to meet that need. And it's not that they're not working or they don't want to see patients. Each provider basically sees one patient every hour starting from 8 o'clock, and then the last patient is taken at 1500. So they're walking out of the clinic at 1600. So roughly each provider sees about 7 to 8 patients a day. And that's a lot because usually there's about, I want to say, 10 to 20 providers depending on the clinic. Now, embedded behavior health, they usually have a smaller provider uh, number. So they're usually, I would say, between 5 providers, maybe to 7, depending on the size of the EBH. But actual hospital behavioral health clinics usually have between, I would say, 15 to 20 providers or more. I mean, we are seeing patients. It's just that the need has increased. And it really is hard to meet the need of behavioral health right now.
Yeah, no, of course. And so that's, soldiers coming in who are not high risk. What happens if someone walks into the clinic and they are high risk? They say, hey, I'm thinking about hurting myself or somebody else. How quickly are they seen? Is that immediate?
So if they walk in, usually every clinic has walk-in hours. So they would be seen, they would be triaged, and then they would go to a provider. If the provider says like, yes, this is someone who needs to be seen, um, we'll do our best to try to work them into the schedule. If not, like, right, let's say we don't have any slots available. We're going to say, okay, we need you to walk in on this walk-in day with this provider so that you can be seen. But before we have that patient walk out of the clinic, we are going to schedule them appointments so that in the future they will have appointments. And so that's what I myself do. Whenever I'm leaving the clinic, I book my appointments like 4 weeks out. So I have an appointment either every other week, or if I was seeing them every week, I would make sure to book as far out as I could. That way, whenever I'm leaving the clinic, I book the next week that's available. So I know that I'm going to have an appointment. And that's what I recommend to all patients. Like, if you for sure know that you want to be seen, book the appointment. Even if you don't think you want to or even if you think that you don't want to be seen after, such amount of time, still book the appointment and then you can cancel. And I'm telling you, there is such a long wait list that appointment will be filled.
No, I mean, and that makes sense. And so, I know the Army has made a pretty massive transition just in the time that I've been in. So I'm working on 16 years right now. So when I first joined, uh, behavioral health was, it was a dirty word, right? You didn't go there. You figured out how to deal with it on your own. And now we're reaching a point where we have senior leaders saying, hey, absolutely go see behavioral health. I mean, we had Sergeant of the Army, Princeton retired, who, when he was the SMA said, look, if we do maintenance on our vehicles and we do maintenance on ourselves for PT, we should also do maintenance on ourselves for, our brain health and our mental health. So I'm not sure, though, that the stigma is gone yet. So can we kind of talk about the stigma or the destigmatization of behavioral health? What does that look like? If I'm worried about my career, am I going to have any issues if I come in and get seen?
So first, as much as we try to destigmatize behavioral health, I don't think the stigma will ever be eradicated. And the reason being is because the stigma comes from how we are raised. So if we think about the civilian population and how we're raised in childhood, right? A lot of boys or men, right, depending on, what you want to refer to them as at that age, are told men don't cry. Men don't seek out help. If you seek out help, you're weak. You shouldn't be crying. You shouldn't be sharing your problems. Like, you suck it up and you drive on. Unfortunately, that's what we are dealing with. Is until that changes, until that outlook on life is updated, we should say. I think that stig- the stigma is always going to be there. Um, So it's not only going to take us in the Army, but it's also going to take our families as well, because how we're raising our children is what is going to be carried on into the next generation. So that's where stigma is. It also goes into play of, once we have that in us from childhood, then we come into the military with it, and we say, like, oh, if you see behavioral health, you're weak. You shouldn't be telling people your problems. You're a grown man. You shouldn't be crying. Or, you're a mom and you have two children looking up to you. You shouldn't be crying, and because that they're going to see that. But the way we need to look at it as is, don't you think the stronger person is the one that's asking for help? Don't we think that, being able to say, like, hey, I need help, I'm struggling, is going to be the NCO that you want to have, rather than the one that is internally struggling and barely keeping themselves together, but maybe taking it out on other people.
Yeah, no, look, 100%. I mean, I think there's strength in getting seen, right?
Yeah.
But let's go to the main question here, which is let's talk about career impact, right? Um, if I come in and it's not high risk behavior, i.e., it's not, suicidal or homicidal ideations, and it's just, I guess we can call it maintenance, right? That's what SMA retired called it. Um, am I looking at, shooting myself in the foot when it comes to my career?
So a lot of people are going to tell you, like, and I hear it all the time, if you go to behavior health, it's a career ender. If you go to behavior health, you're going to be med boarded, you're going to be, you're going to be checked out of the Army, so on and so forth. So number one, if you come into behavior health, there is a process that we have to follow in order to med board somebody out. And our first option is going to be like, oh, you need to see behavior health, you got to go. Um, because we're the ones telling you, like, hey, come and see us. Um, so, if someone goes into behavior health, and this happens a lot in basic training, and the reason being is, if someone comes into behavior health and then is basically put in for a med board due to behavior health reasons, that condition was pre-existing before they entered into the service. And so the providers are saying, like, hey, due to this condition, right, we do not think that you are going to be able to be rehabilitated in order to continue to serve. So, and that process is a lot. Like, we have to exhaust all of our options: therapy, medication, outpatient treatment. We have to exhaust all those options before we say you need to med board. So that's number one. You're never going to go into behavior health and then be completely med boarded. Number two is, let's say it's someone who has, like, for example, you and I, let's say we go into behavioral health. I've been serving for almost 11 years. You've been in for almost 16 years. If we go in and let's say after a couple of visits, a med board comes up, that med board is only coming up because we have basically told the provider, like, there is no way that we are going to be able to be rehabilitated and that this is affecting my job. So I cannot complete my job and safely ensure the safety of my soldiers, my subordinates, my peers, or my superiors because of my behavioral health condition. So obviously, they still have to go through rehabilitation. We have to try to ensure that we exhaust all avenues and all approaches before we say a med board is the best option for this individual. So that can include inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, medication, therapy, group therapy. So there's so much that goes into med boarding someone. So that's the first stigma, right? The second one is if you go in there, you're never going to be able to do anything. So with behavior health, number one, it depends on the time in which you have been seen. So, for example, you and I have talked about going green to gold, and obviously, I'm in this place right now in my career that I have to get a medical waiver for seeing behavior health. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm disqualified from green to gold. What it means is that I saw behavior health in this span of time, which I believe for green to gold it's 36 months. And that waiver has to go up to and I had to provide documentation, right? I had to give my medical documents. I had to tell them why I was in behavior health, and that it wasn't affecting my work. I had to have a behavior health evaluation. I had to go through and get a 3822, just like everybody else. And then it goes up to the lieutenant colonel for ROTC, and then he's going to say, look at my packet and say, hey, we think that, your condition is not going to affect your work. You're not going to be affected in a stressful environment. Yes, you can go. Now, on the other hand, if you go to see behavior health and your condition is going to be impacted by a stressful environment, or, if your work ethic is going to be impacted or your work performance, then maybe right now isn't going to be that good of a time for you. So they're not saying, you can never go to behavior health or you can never go green to gold or CID, drill sergeant, recruiter, what have you, just not right now. And that's happened to me before too, before green to gold. I applied to go CID and I was seeing behavior health and I was deferred for a year. Now, after that year, I was going to reapply. Then I got pregnant and then I got pregnant again. And then COVID happened, so there was no PT test. And then I got promoted and they don't accept staff sergeants. So it's not that it's an end all be all. It's just sometimes there's a process that we have to go through.
I was going to say, I think that's really important to talk about, right? Is because so many people think that, hey, I went and I saw behavioral health and now my career's over, right? I'm never going to promote. I'm
Mm-hmm.
never going to be selected for a nominative assignment. I can't go drill sergeant. I can't go recruiter. I can't do green and gold or warrant or anything like that. And that simply is not true. So if we have people out there who are high performers, right, who can say, hey, look, I was most qualified on my last evaluation. I've got, stellar letters of recommendation and things like that. We are saying that even with behavioral health, those people can make it into those programs, correct?
Absolutely. I am a poster child for behavior health. Like, not only am I behavior health, but I have seen behavior health at least 3 times in my career. And this latest uh, session for behavior health, right? It was in 2022. I had a pretty tough year. I lost 3 grandparents who were my only remaining grandparents. So I lost all of them in a year. My divorce was finalized. I became a single mom. I had to sell my off post house, which at the time was like when the market was a seller's market, but the buyers didn't want it to be a seller market. So, they're like, well, you need to fix this, and this. And I'm like, no, you're going to take the house or that's it. And it was very stressful because I'm trying to sell my house because I live on post and I have a single income. So we know that, those 2 things aren't adding up for an E6. So it was very stressful. You know, I realized that I needed help because I was going through, so I used to vape. I've talked about this on my Twitter account. Um, the vapes that were like, the 5,000 puff vapes, I went through one of those in like 3 days. That's how bad I knew I needed help. I was drinking a lot. And so I said, hey, I know I need help, so I'm going to go get help. And I did. Now, we think back, or I think back, and everybody says, I'm never gonna be able to promote. Well, I've been seeing behavioral health on and off for 3 times since I joined the military, and I've made it all the way to staff sergeant. I just closed my, I guess you would call it my staff sergeant board. Not the it's not the sergeant first class board. It's the staff sergeant board.
It's to get promoted to sergeant first class, right?
Yes. So
there you go.
So I just closed my staff sergeant board. And I was a BLC instructor, so there's my broadening assignments. Everybody thinks you can't get on broadening assignments. While I was an instructor at the schoolhouse, I came down on drill sergeant orders not once but twice within a 6-month span. So when I tell you that you can see behavioral health and still go and have a wonderful career, you can.
Right.
I was
and
still
you were selected for Green to Gold Phase 1. And so for people that don't realize this is that Green to Gold takes enlisted soldiers and sends them to college for 2 years to become officers, but it's a 2-phase process. And Phase 1 is incredibly competitive. I mean, we're talking probably 1,500 applicants and probably 400 selectees to move on to Phase 2. So, like, I think that is kind of indicative of the fact that you can go to behavioral health and you can still progress and do great things in your career, right? Because, I'm one of the admins on the Green and Gold Facebook page. I get to see a lot of candidates, when they send their packets behind the curtain to kind of, help them out and create them and craft them. And that is a group of incredibly qualified young soldiers who are applying for this program, right? So what we're saying is that even going to see behavioral health, out of 1,500 applicants, 450 were picked up, and you're one of them. That's impressive. So congratulations on that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I'm
but
just and right now I'm literally just waiting for my medical waiver to come back. So I turned all my documentation in December, and the reason, right, my reasoning behind, because everyone's like, well, why are you still waiting for your medical waiver? There's a reason. The lieutenant colonel who does all of the waivers was actually sent TDY until April 1st. So yeah, so he's actually going through his TDY class during the day, and then he is doing ROTC waivers after business hours. So I understand why it's taking so long. So I'm still like checking DoD Murd like every day. Like the first thing I do when I wake up, I grab my cell phone, I log into DoD. I'm like, did he check it last night? Like, so I'm hopeful that it'll get approved. The reason why I'm waiting on my medical waiver is because I did see behavioral health in the last 36 months, and I was on a psychotropic medication. I got on Paxil for my anxiety, which Paxil I was not planning on getting off of it anytime soon. But if I get selected, or if I get my waiver, when I go through cadet summer training, I'm not allowed to take it. And talking to my provider, they were like, hey, this isn't a permanent drug anyways, so do you want to just go ahead and I was like, well, might as well, like just go ahead, just just rip it from me. But so yeah, you can go to behavior health, you can still have a successful career. Are you gonna have obstacles? Like, yes, absolutely. But just because you have obstacles doesn't mean that it's a no. It just means that you're going to have to take additional steps that other people aren't going to have to take. And, it is a shock at first. Like, even I was shocked, like, why do we have to have a waiver to go to behavior health? Like, we're telling people to go to behavior health, but then you're telling me I have to have a waiver. And I think, honestly, like, the standards do need to be updated a little bit just to make going to behavior health even more appeasing. And there's more, however, when the TRADOC Command Sergeant Major visited Fort Sill a couple of months ago, that was one of the things that I brought up is I'm trying to think of what the standards are called. Help me out here. Whenever you enter the Army.
like the basic standards for enlistment.
Yes, but there's a certain word and I just can't think of it. Anyways, that's what we're talking about. So they are actually looking at updating that. And they're also looking at updating retention standards as well. I know that's not the right term. I'll think of it when we get off of here, but they are actually going through right now, and that is on his, basically like his to-do list is to look at the standards and see if what they can update. And so I think that's really good, because especially when we look at recruitment right now, right? Like, we're down bad. And I think one of the reasons being is, maybe for us, that have been in for a while, maybe our recruiter told us to lie about some stuff when we were entering, right? Shout out to the recruiters for trying to make their mission. But now it's a little bit harder because now we have Genesis access. And so you can say one thing, but we can go into your file and say, like, no, you're lying, you're disqualified. So I really do think that if we update the retention and the recruitment standards, it might not only help those of us that want to go, drill sergeant, recruiter, which actually I think, don't quote me on this because I've been out of behavioral health for 2 years now. Um, I think that behavioral health evaluation has actually been nixed for those two. Um, Obviously for CID and like special operations, they are still for sure a go. But going warrant or officer or green to gold or, all the other options, I think it would definitely benefit that, but it would greatly, greatly benefit recruitment of all places, especially since for the last 2 years, we haven't made mission.
Well, I mean, and I think that kind of like, what we talked about earlier, when we were talking to this podcast is like, we want people to get help. We want people to get seen. And so we're telling the force that, hey, you can absolutely, be in the military, go to behavioral health. It's not going to impact your career. It's not going to limit your, perspectives. But we're also saying if you saw behavioral health before you joined the Army, you're not welcome here. Right. And so I think that, that line kind of has to get fixed, right? Because it's kind of counterintuitive to say, hey, you can't have seen somebody before you came in, but now that you're here, it's okay. Right. And so I think that's policy that needs to catch up to where we're at, one as a society, and two, where we're at as a military.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's the same thing when you look at going, for me and others going green to gold or warrant officer. So you're telling us that we are perfectly fine being a non-commissioned officer, being in charge of people, being in charge of, or being responsible for millions, billions of dollars of equipment. They entrust me as an NC. So when I was at Fort Sill, I was NCYC of the BH clinic before I went over to the academy. And, I was responsible for junior enlisted soldiers, I was responsible for officers, and I was responsible for civilian providers. I was responsible for everything in the behavioral health clinic, as well as the embedded behavioral health clinics and I cannot think of I hope you guys can't hear my mom yelling at my kids.
But you're responsible for all of that. But we're
Yeah,
saying you could do that as an
all of that
NCO, but
equipment.
you can't do it as an officer, right?
Yeah, you're telling me that as a non-commissioned officer, I'm perfectly fine doing it. But because I'm going to become an officer, eh, now we don't know about you. Now we're unsure. Even though you were rated number one, we don't know how you perform as an officer.
Yeah, no, I mean, one, I agree with you. I remember going through the DOBR, which is the Department of Defense Medical Evaluation Review Board, for those that are sick of acronyms in the military. But listen, I was disqualified as well for, blowing out my knee in 2009. And so here I am in 2016 applying for this program. I've done 2 deployments to Afghanistan since then, walking up and down mountains, like, had a good PT score, everything was good. And they came back, they're like, hey, listen, you're not qualified to be an officer. And so I had to go through the entire waiver process. And so I do, I do understand what you're saying because I've been through that pain as well. I agree with you that, listen, we have some fantastic NCOs that deserve to be officers should they decide to do that or decide to be warrant officers, right? They are more than capable to do that. We put up a lot of hurdles to good soldiers progressing sometimes when we do that. Part of me wonders if that's part of the game, right? It's like, how badly do you want it that you're going to go through
Yeah.
this entire process?
No,
But
really.
listen, I agree with you. When we talk about good NCOs tend to make great officers, right? There's always that 5% that doesn't, but they're the outliers. And so I agree with you on all that.
I think it's just really important to note that just because you see behavioral health and you have to get a waiver doesn't mean you're a bad person. The reason why you have to go through the waiver process is so that, number one, just because you see behavioral health doesn't mean you're instantly disqualified. Number two, it's so that they can see the special circumstances surrounding why you sought out behavior health. That's why you have to provide your documentation. So now they're going to be able to see, okay, so she finalized her divorce. She became a single mother. She lost 3 of her grandparents all within the span of a year. The girl was going through it. Yeah, I think anybody in their right mind would reach out to behavior health. And then, you know, hopefully, you know, hopefully they approve my waiver. But I also have a friend who was applying to the PA program. She's a staff sergeant out of JBLM. She's also one of my admins on the Army Mom Life. And the reason she sought out, I God, I hope she doesn't kill me for this. Everybody knows, but
Well,
I just
you don't have to
still.
share it if you don't want to, right? I mean, because
No, I'm not
other
gonna
people
get
will
into
hear
like
this as well.
I'm not gonna get into like her like personal stuff, but she sought out behavior health because when her son was born, he had a heart defect. So basically, as a newborn, he was put on the transplant list, and he was in the hospital literally for the first year of his life. And so we sit here and we think like that would mess up any parent. Like, you know, yeah, she sought behavior health and her waiver did get approved. And so it's important, again, that people understand that just because you seek out behavior health doesn't mean you're going to be disqualified. It just means that they have to look into why did you seek out behavior health? Because if the Army is the reason that you are so stressed out that you cannot perform, maybe getting a job of higher responsibility or of a higher stress level isn't for you right now, right? And that's not saying that they're going to say no forever. It's just a no right now. It's not a denial, it's a deferment. And that's important to note. So, like, just like me, if they would say no to me, this year, they're not saying no forever. It just means that I have to wait, until that time period lapses. And, I don't know if I would reapply because, that would be like another 24 months, but
Yeah,
maybe
it's a
we'll see what
process for
happens.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's a
mean,
stressful one.
I think this is an important conversation, one to have, and two for people to listen to, because that stigma does exist, right? I
Mhm.
think as our younger population in the Army promotes, we have those, former PFCs and specialists who saw behavioral health and now they're sergeants first class and master sergeants, right? Hopefully a lot of these stigmas go away. Like I went and saw behavioral health for 8 months, and I will tell you that when I first started going, like I was very hesitant. As a matter of fact, I remember walking in, doing the initial intake, and then being like the initial paperwork and reading the fine print and being like, yeah, you know what, I'm good. And I walked out. Like I straight up just left, right?
Mhm.
And then a good provider, called me back the next day and said, hey, we noticed you started your paperwork, but you didn't finish it. You left. You want to have a conversation, and that's what got me back into it. And I will tell you, I'm a better, probably husband for it, a better dad for it. I'm a better soldier for it as well. And so I think it's important to have these conversations with people, especially in this forum where someone can watch this or listen to this podcast anonymously, right, and be like, okay, maybe today's the day that I go walk into behavioral health and I go get seen, right, to take care of myself and to do some basic maintenance. Cause I think that's the key part there, right? Is like, you don't have to go to behavioral health solely, because it's too much for you, right? You can go there to set up your appointments, to do basic maintenance on yourself.
Mhm.
And I don't think we talk about that enough in the Army and in the military.
I will say the one thing that I try my hardest to get across to everybody is don't go to behavior health when you are overwhelmed, right? So don't wait until like the house is on fire and you're trying to get out. Once you start seeing, that there's issues, or once you start seeing like, hey, I'm not eating the same, I'm not exercising as I was, I'm not sleeping the same, or maybe I'm a little agitated, I'm having mood swings, I'm being very irritable. that's when you should go to behavioral health, because if you stop it before it gets too much, it's going to be a lot easier than when I said, like, the house is on fire and you're trying to get out of it while, all the exits are blocked. And the other thing is, just walking into the behavioral health clinic is a huge step for people. It is, a lot of people think, like, you walk into our clinic and we're going to, like, get our claws into you and we're going to suck you in and you're never going to leave. But just walking in, asking for a pamphlet or looking at all the things that we have out, because we usually have flyers up about our groups. We have flyers up about the different therapies that you can get or how to contact behavioral health. I will say just walking into the clinic is a big thing. Or just making an appointment to be seen is a big thing. And it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you small. I personally think it makes a strong leader. Somebody who can openly also talk about you. And you don't have to, right? Don't share anything that you don't want to, but being able to be open about with your soldiers about, like, hey, yeah, I see behavior health. As an instructor, I told all of my students, like, yeah, I go and see behavior health because I needed to see it at that time of my life. I probably wouldn't be as good of a mother or as good as a wife right now had I not sought out maybe I wouldn't even be a wife if I hadn't sought out behavior health, right? Like, I started seeing behavior health as I met my now husband. So I think seeing behavior health, just even if you just need to talk to somebody even once, is a good thing. It doesn't make you any less of a human being or weak.
No, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I hope people, if they take one thing away from this, they realize that it is okay to go and get seen. It doesn't make you any less effective as a soldier. On the contrary, it probably does the opposite, right? It probably makes you more effective. Now I'm having conversations with new soldiers that are entering the Army and saying, hey, look, there's nothing wrong with this. And even if you decide it's not for you, at least you now have the information to pass along to your soldiers, right? So you let them know that it is okay. Look,
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for being on today. Thank you so much for taking
Yeah.
the time to talk with me on a weekend when there's kids in the background. And hopefully, we can work to continue to destigmatize behavioral health, right? And hopefully everyone takes this to heart and goes and talks to somebody.
Hopefully.
Awesome. Hey, Nicole, thank you so much for being on today. Looking forward to your selection in the green and gold. And thank you so much for being with us today. All right.
Thanks for having us, or having me.